Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening everybody. Welcome back to my YouTube channel and to another installment in the Sydney Railroad build. If you've been following the series for the last 3 weeks, you will have seen me frame up the main peninsula on the upper level. This week I'm going to start adding the plywood tops and the sub-road bed for the track. So without further ado, let's just head out to the workshop and continue working. Well, yesterday afternoon I finished framing the end of the peninsula on the upper deck. And I reported that the next task was to get it sheeted. Well, then I realized that before I do that, I still have some framing to finish at the far end. If we look on the lower deck, we see we have a nice curved end former for the fascia. On the upper deck, I haven't done that yet. So that'll be my first task for today. And I've already started. I've cut out this piece of sub-road bed to the right profile and got it perfectly aligned with the belt sander, and that clears the way to be able to line up the top deck with it. And I was just about to start up there, I realized I didn't have any offcuts of plywood that were big enough. So I've gone back to the next board. I've already made the bottom former for this one. I've still got to cut out the reach-in hole to get to the bolt. But before I do that, I want to use that piece as a pattern to get the sub-road bed for the yard done. So I've brought over a sheet of plywood. I'm going to get it aligned with the frame, and then I'll use that piece I've just cut to draw around. So let me do that, and I will be right back. Well, I have this benchwork top installed, and I've also glued the bottom former below it, and I have shaped the next piece that goes in here and marked the ends where I've got to cut them. I think now the easiest way to continue is to move across the other side of the aisle and work my way to the corner from the other side. Because once I get this straight piece in, I can then line the 14-inch former up between the two ends and get everything finished. So I'm going to continue that way, and I will talk to you again later. With this short piece of straight framing now installed, it's a simple matter to use the 14-inch curve template to rest against both ends, both here and there, and then I can draw around it. So I'm just going to get an offcut of plywood that's big enough to do that, clamp it to the frame, and then draw around that former. Well, this end curve is now almost complete. I've got this corner in, both top and bottom. I made the bottom one first and then used it as a template to make the top one. This piece, I took the precaution of not gluing it in place yet, because I will probably still need to use it as a template when I put the top in. But I'm not ready to do that today. I've still got to work out whether that frame gets fully sheeted or if I use strips of road bed. I know in this corner it's just going to be strips of sub-road bed wherever the track goes. But I think this corner is going to be a solid top. Well, that is 3 sections sheeted. Actually, it's the easiest 3. I've already mentioned the complexities at the other end. At this point, the backdrop starts to meander its way back and forth across the middle third of the peninsula in a very specific alignment. And of course, both sides are at different heights, so I've got to get it pretty accurate. I'm going to go in now, get a plan together, and I'll come out again tomorrow and continue. Before I went in yesterday, I mentioned that the benchwork tops are going to get a little bit more complex from now on. I checked my drawings, printed out the right section, made some notes, and it turns out I have to fill in the missing framing in this area before I can install the next sheet of plywood. Most of that framing is at the higher level for the paper mill, but it does have to drop down at this end to make its way under the main yard level. I've got a plan for that in my head, so let me just get to work and I'll talk to you again soon. Well, there is that piece of plywood installed. It wasn't that difficult, it just took a bit longer to get started because of the framing necessary. I have covered over a good portion of the access hole in the back there, but I always figured it was going to be a lot easier to put the sheet on whole and then cut it in situ once I got the full-size track print. I don't want to try calculating it and risk getting it cut in the wrong place. And the hole is still plenty big enough to use. I could put the two small pieces on in the back corners, but I think I would rather continue and get the next frame sheeted. That goes as far as here. It's the short one. I think it's less than 48 inches, in which case I'll put the plywood the other way and go all the way to the back. Well, there is the next section sheeted. This piece that goes sideways with a cutout in the corner. I've also filled in both sides of the access hole. I still haven't cut out the front of it. I'll do that once I've got the full-size print there. The other thing I've done today, you can see in the distance, I've sheeted one section for the paper mill. I two-pieced that because that way I was able to use up an offcut from the harbour instead of cutting a whole new sheet. Anyway, that is all that I have the information for today. I've got to go in and work out how to get around the end curve because it's all grades. So I'm just going to leave it there for now, and I'll talk to you again later. Over the weekend, the full-size trap print arrived, so I can now work on the area around the engine terminal. This is strip 3 of 7, and it is currently positioned where it needs to be on this plywood sheet. I only need little more than half a sheet for this piece. I'm going to cut it here, and this thin red line, I don't know if the camera's picking it up very well, but that is the edge of the access hole, so the plywood can also be cut along there. Well, I have now permanently installed that piece of plywood that you last saw me cutting. I've also got the next piece cut approximately to shape, but just resting there temporarily. And I've joined two pieces of the full-size print together just to get it accurately positioned. And then what I've done is drilled a series of small holes just with the very tip of the drill all the way along where I've got to cut it to get the branch line to fall down below grade. So now I can roll this trap plan up again and get that piece cut accurately. Again. Well, that piece of subroadbed that I was working on in the last clip has now been cut into 5 pieces. 2 of them are permanently installed, and the front one is just tacked in place with 2 screws. I still have to cut that one, get the front edge to line up with the piece below it. And that's the reason that I didn't put any glue on the bottom piece, because I need to take it off and use that as a pattern. I've also found an offcut of plywood big enough to do the next piece of subroadbed. And here is the end of roll number 1 of the full-size print. So I'm going to cut the next piece. I'm not going to install it yet because I've still got to work out the grade and get it at the right height. So let me go away, do that, and I'll be right back. Well, that is all the subroadbed cut for this corner. The piece at the back is permanently installed as that's on the level. That is for the end of the yard lead. The main line climbs up in front of it. Grade starts just there, just to the left of the drills, and passes over a flyover. And the abandoned short line, the grade starts all back here. So I've got to cut out the framing underneath that just a little bit, notch it slightly, and it drops down, passing under the main line. Actually, the track will stop just short of the overpass, and the plan is to model the rest of the grade as having been converted into a cycling trail. Anyway, it's time to go in now and feed Zeus, so that will be a task for tomorrow. Yesterday I made a lot of progress in this area. My goal for this morning is to work out the grades, get the mainline grade started, get all that raised to the right elevation all the way around the end, and also start work on the lower grade at the front and get this part of the front edge cut off to the right place. I might have to take this whole plywood sheet off to lower that, I don't know yet. I might be able to do it with in situ, or I might just cut that and then splice it later. Haven't decided yet. So I'm just going to get to work and I'll talk to you later. Well, I started with the upgrade on the main line. That step, what you can see now, coincides with where the foam ends. The yard area is getting a sheet of 1/2-inch foam on top, allowing for drainage ditches and other relief. Whereas from this point I don't need it because it's just a narrow strip, only where the track goes. There'll be a similar step on the branch line going down. You can see I've also lowered this grade. I decided to cut it out and splice it. Decided it made it a lot easier. I did make one mistake. I cut more out of the framing here than I needed to because I forgot about that 1/2-inch step. But that doesn't matter. It's still plenty strong enough. I took the precaution of doubling up this frame, and this one is only a short piece, so I have more than enough strength left. Anyway, I'm going to turn the camera off, get back to work, and I'll see you again later. Well, that is all the complex grades at this end completed. The main line is almost full height here. It levels out, then it crosses a bridge, and then heads all the way down to a small switching town in the distance. Here is the short line, or the branch line, that will end about here before the bridge, and as I mentioned earlier, be modelled as a walking or cycling trail from that point onwards. This flat area between the two is the engine terminal, and then there's another flat area behind it where this drill is for the yard lead. And then beyond that, an inch lower, is the lead tracks for the intermodal yard and the harbour area in the distance. Well, that's all for this week's instalment. Hope you enjoyed the video, found it useful or interesting or both, and I hope to see you back next week, where I will continue where I left off. So in the meantime, thanks for watching, and bye for now.